Hi, Tim here with Clive Coffee. We're going to show you how an E61 group head works. We've already disassembled the main components of the E61 group head, and we're going to jump right into what the most important parts are and the direction of water, how that flows. Starting up at the top, if you look at your E61 group head fully assembled, you see this cap up at the top. When it's removed, inside you have what is called the mushroom, people refer to as a mushroom. This gasket here, the heart of your E61, opens and closes the water before it moves to our second chamber. Any leaking, 9 times out of 10, is going to be due to this gasket wearing or failing. Anytime you see a spring with a pin, you know that water is being sealed or stopped at that gasket. So on this top mushroom cap, you see the classic, there's a spring with a pin here, and there's a gasket on the inside there. So when this pin is in the down position, it's sealed up and closed. It's butting against a metal piece inside the group. And when it pushes up and opens, water is able to flow freely. To give you an overall picture of how water is flowing in the group head, there's really two main water areas in this E61 group head. The first is everything above the, or at the mushroom cap above this sealing point, and we'll get into that a little bit more. And so that's happening from your group head in this top chamber of the E61. When your water is open at this pin, the water is able to flow into this middle chamber, which is kind of like a switchboard with your lever, and into the actual group head itself. So think of it as two very separate chambers, this top area and then above the mushroom cap, and then this lower area that fills all the way to the group head itself. To really zero in on the heart of the E61 group head, it's this top gasket and pin, and that's pretty deep inside the E61 group head. It's really the heart of what's happening here. So I'm going to show you how that sits in the E61, and it's really cool. As we put this back into place in the top, this pin we're going to see is going to be visible from this switchboard area where the lever is opening and closing these valves. So we'll drop this pin in place, and you see it visible now in that middle chamber. When your lever is in a down position, that pin is in its downmost position. That means it's sealed. So that gasket is pushing up against the metal in the group head. And when you pull this lever into an up position, you can see this cam is working to push up. So it's pushing up on the pin when it's fully up. And what that's doing is pushing up on the pin and opening the water flow. To give you a little bit of an idea of what's happening as far as water flow in this group head, we'll pull this mushroom cap back out and take a quick peek inside the top area here, this top chamber. The water in this entire top chamber is coming in through the two holes that are connected to the coffee boiler. So the water is freely flowing into this group head, and it's kind of circulating around the mushroom. That's what heats your E61 group head. This entire mass here comes up to temperature, very close to that temperature you want on the coffee boiler, and it holds that temperature. It's an excellent design that you continue to see in espresso machines today, even though the E61 group head was designed back in 1961. The water that's flowing into this top chamber is freely moving at all points. It is circulating around the mushroom here, And the water's actually flowing in an interesting pathway here. It goes up, and if you take a close look, there are holes around the top point here that the water is flowing from the coffee boiler up to the top of the cap. And you will often notice a screen that's inside the cap here. So the water is flowing up the holes, and they hit the screen before they go back down a very tiny hole. If you look head on, that tiny hole is now moving through this entire chamber to our gasket down here before it moves on to the group head. The screen that's in place helps protect that very tiny hole, that giclure, that restricts the flow of water into the group head to make sure you have a very even flow. The screen does not filter everything. You still want to have soft, clean, filtered water going into the machine. You can check out our water discussions for more on that. So the water moves up into the top of the cap, passes the screen, goes down through the very center of this entire chamber, and this gasket here, the heart of your E61, opens and closes the water before it moves to our second chamber. Any leaking, 9 times out of 10, will be due to the gasket that seals the top chamber and so that top chamber near the mushroom cap and the coffee boiler, and then the rest of your water flow at the group head. Most leaking that you would see on an E61 group head is going to be due to this gasket right here, deep in the heart of your E61. Moving on to that secondary chamber, we need to take a look at this lever and the cam. When this lever is in that fully open position, we know that the metal is pushing against the top of that valve on our mushroom cap, and it's opening up water flow, and now water is moving into the second chamber that's going into the group head. If you look closely, inside this area where your lever screws into place, so it sits on your E61 group and it's attached here, this lever acts essentially as a switchboard. That cam is opening and closing 2 pins. We've already talked about that top pin. You can see where that sits. And the secondary pin is the bottom, our relief valve. And so that's what that long piece down at the bottom is. It's a series of, and again, we have a spring with a pin here, and there's a gasket. So that gasket, when the pin is in an up position, it's pushing against the metal on the group head and seals up. And when that pin is pushed down by the cam, it opens up the flow of water and releases pressure down through this chamber and out into your drip tray. So you can see with both of our top mushroom and bottom piece in place, you have those 2 pins that allow water to flow from the top chamber. This top pin, when it opens up, water flows into this group head here. And then you can see this bottom pin controls pressure releasing. So the way the cam works, whenever the lever is in the down position, it's essentially pushing and opening the valve here. So you have an open pathway. So there's air flow here. It releases pressure. And then as you move that lever at about 90 degrees, it starts to push up on this top chamber. That's what's opening the flow between the top area and your group head. When it's fully up, you know water's now flowing from this top chamber into the group head, so now it's all one system. And we've closed up that bottom release, so that pressure that's relieved at the end of your shot, that's sealed up here during the brew process. That's necessary so that you can have the pressure directed to your portafilter where you're brewing coffee. And that's why the cam is in this particular shape. That's what opens and closes valves so that you have really one or the other open at any given time. With your brew lever in the fully open position, this top chamber has now released flow into the group head. And if you take a very close look, there's a small hole, if you peek inside here, that directs water into the group head here. And so now you have a basic understanding of how the E61 group head works. Again, a quick review. Water, it enters the top chamber and it's always freely flowing around that top mushroom cap. As the lever moves into the open position, flow is open now to that secondary chamber that fills the group head and provides water flow to your espresso, to your portafilter. Simultaneously, you're closing up the valve at the bottom, so this is now directing water to the group head and not out through the bottom. And when you go in the reverse direction and your lever goes from the up position down, you're now shutting off the two chambers, so the top chamber gets closed up and pressure is relieved out through this pathway here at the bottom. That will allow you to remove that portafilter without a lot of pressure built up in there. The main heart of your E61 group head is that point that connects the two chambers, and that was the first thing we showed. That would be typically where any leaking would happen. Replacing that gasket in there is going to be the solution for most leaking that you see coming into the drip tray. The bottom chamber is pretty resilient and is not often replaced. If you get the occasional leaking at the lever, there are some additional gaskets inside that could be causing some leaking at that point. That was the basic overview of how the E61 group head functions. For more information and in-depth, step-by-step how to remove all of those pins and gaskets in the E61 group head, you can check out this video here. For other tech tips, visit our knowledge base at clivecoffee.com.